Welcome back to MUSE on the Mic. I'm Riley.
And I'm Emily. Thanks for joining us on another awesome episode of MUSE on the Mic. Make sure you are following us everywhere and subscribing to all the channels, Patreon, YouTube, everything. And you can find all our social media in the caption below to kind of follow along and see what we're up to. Riley, we have a really fun topic today. It's a little interesting. It's a little hippie-ish. I think it's cool. What are we going to do? And I think we also have a little cheers.
Oh, yes. We wanted to shout out to JK Mugz for making us our new mugs. He makes us everything. He's so amazing.
I love it.
Thank you.
Our names, it's got both company logos. It's hefty. I like it.
Check him out, guys.
We'll tag him in the caption too.
So today we are jumping into the science of sex, and there is a lot of science behind sex, guys. So we're going to start with a video from the Diary of a CEO, hosted by Steven, and he has a guest on this segment we're going to watch, Dr. John Gottman. So let's jump into that, and then we'll chat about it.
Let's do it.
Men who kiss their wives goodbye when they leave for work live 4 years longer than men who don't. And that's a perfunctory kiss. But the 6-second kiss, which we recommend, has much more potential than that peck on the cheek.
What is the 6-second kiss? Why not 5 or 4?
Because oxytocin gets secreted. With a 20-second hug or a 6-second kiss, you're both secreting oxytocin. And that creates a sense of psychological safety and connection.
And bonding.
All right. So I think that was super fascinating. Like I'd never really thought about the timeline and like the duration of how that triggers and fulfills a need. But what an interesting sex fact to know.
I think it is. And I mean, we know that the brain releases chemicals, endorphins and things like that. Like most of us get that and understand it, but to have it on such a timing of nope, not 4 seconds, it has to be 6. That really, it makes men live longer. I mean, we know men live longer that are with women or in relationships, but literally just a 6-second kiss, guys, is all it takes. So kiss your man.
I love it. I think it's easy. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that you can integrate without it being like weird. It's like your partner's gonna be like, what are you doing? Right? Like it's just a slightly longer little smooch. Mm-hmm. And the one about hugs, I mean, I feel like we all knew, especially during the pandemic, that like hugs were directly related to happiness. Mm-hmm. I, for one, struggled with that. And I remember crying to you about it a few times. And I was like, I haven't seen a human in 5 months. Like, I was like, if someone doesn't hug me today, I am going to just cry for the next 6 weeks. And I think it makes such a big, big difference. I'll never forget our first hug after being separated during the pandemic for so long. And you were trying to like break, and I'm like, absolutely not. Like, bring it in tighter. I'm not leaving for the next 5 minutes. But it was probably because I had like 20-second chunks to make up for.
Yeah, of course.
It's weird when you don't have that. Like, I think that's something we should even implement at Muse is like a mandatory thing. Like when you're greeting customers, when you're saying thank you for something from, say generous gentleman or whatever, like linger in that hug a little bit. It was 22 seconds. Yeah. Make it count.
I know a lot of our managers do hug the clients as they come in, especially like regulars, familiar faces. But I'm going to test them and be like, hug them for a little longer. And let's see what the success rate of them staying for the session versus, I'm not going to take an appointment today. If that changes, because it could.
For sure. And how they feel. I would be curious to be like, how do you feel afterwards? See if it makes it go from like, I don't know, 9.5 to a 10. Why not take it over the top with just a hug at front desk? What? Come on. That's hot.
But what I think was really cool about that video, but in particular, I mean, like I said, we know about the hormones that get released through kissing or sex, but that these hormones can actually bond people. Like they create bonds, they create security, they make people fall in love. Like it is wild and strong. It's a powerful thing.
It's very powerful. I'm gonna jump into a bit of a breakdown on kind of why that happens, because there are psychological and physiological reasons why certain circumstances or even certain sexes tend to get attached a little bit easier or a little bit more often, or to a different intensity. Now, I think, let's give grace and credit to, let's say, horny teenagers, your first experience. I think everybody's equally nervous. I think everything is super intense. But you're also super naive psychologically. And that's where the confusion comes with some of the body feelings that you're like, what is happening, right? So I'll give a little grace there. Obviously, there's grace for solo pleasure, because that's just you in your own room, in your own space, with your own energy. But if you're talking about a typical male-female sexual encounter, which includes penetrative sex of any kind, where the woman is the one being penetrated, there is a very specific reason why women more often fall in love, why women more often end up with an attachment that could be a healthy attachment or an unhealthy attachment. I think most women could say we've been in both sides of that car before. Neither is particularly all fabulous or all hellish, but there's some bumps on those roads for sure. But even the way, if you were to take two people and then separate them afterwards and almost interview them and ask them to describe their last sexual encounter, the way they would describe it is very, very different. And the reasons are this. For men, sex is often or almost always, in a straight penetrative environment, an external experience. Their penis is an appendage. It's outside of their body, right? And with either releasing things like serotonin, refueling some of the testosterone that he's about to lose through ejaculation, and kind of keeping that recharge almost, he has to plug into the woman's body. He has to literally insert himself, think just like a plug, to charge up. Or to get rid of any other energy. And through orgasm, the man's orgasm, and therefore all his sexual energy, is directed away from the body, away from the heart, and into his partner. It's like, it's not just DNA, but there's actual energetic systems that roll with that as well. And for women, it is absolutely the opposite. For women, sex is invasive because it's internal. Someone literally mounts themselves into your body. They plug into you, and whatever juice they give, whether they're charging up or dumping, you're on the receiving end of that regardless. And women's orgasm draws inwards, right? The contractions the purpose is to draw semen up into the uterus, right? So everything pulls in, and that's also directed towards the heart. So by the time that is all finished, we've been invaded, seeded, and filled with sexual energy from this person. And he's spent, refueled, and off he goes to go, ride his horse into his day. And there's actual reasons why psychologically we have to digest that in a very different way to end up not attached. And I think we were just chatting about this before we started recording, because there's kind of an imbalance there when you talk about sex work, because we can't just end up with emotional, energetic soul ties to every client we've ever seen in our life. That's crazy. We'd be miserable and psychotic. But the not all sex work involves penetrative or straight sex. And so there is still a release of energy. There's still orgasmic explosion, right? So that energy is coming out of somewhere. It may float around in the room. It may just, cover her face. It may be wherever it goes, but there is still a give and take, a give and receive in that regard. Same with her. She enjoys an orgasm or two, which hopefully sex workers out there are having more orgasms than not. But there's literally that reason why this exchange happens the way it is, why women digest it differently and end up almost with this desperation attachment that you have to get the guy, you have to lock him down, you have to the chase thing happens. It can go all kinds of crazy directions. Or if it's reciprocated, great, you have a new boyfriend, right? But digesting that, especially if you're unaware of that, if you're just willy-nilly, I think of teenagers, and you're out here where you've learned your body, you've broken the seal, you've lost your virginity, but now you're gaining your experience. You may not really understand how much you're taking on each time. I was an adventurous teen. Okay. I took some energy in my day, but I didn't know any of that. I didn't know how to digest that. I didn't know why I thought every guy was the one. all these things. I thought everything should be like a soap opera or everything should be like a fairy tale and happily ever after happens, right? He climbs up your hair and you're in love, you know, he turns you
Right.
from a frog and he's the prince. Like this to me was like you just spewed in me. Where's the ring? This should just be a thing. I know you've talked to me a little bit personally too. You get attached as well. But then sex workers, we don't see our girls just like falling over themselves because they're devastatedly in love.
No. Well, and
Super interesting.
I think it happens. I think it's
Mhm.
pretty rare, but it certainly does. We were even taking to Google because I'm thinking like, why aren't sex workers all over the world falling in love with their clients? Because there is that energy exchange, and there is a lot of pleasure received. And I mean, you know what? There's probably a lot of different answers out there. I think the one that stood out to both of us the most was just the ability to disassociate,
Mhm.
to use your alter ego. And I think that's a very real and powerful thing. It can, like we've said before, it can be used for good or evil. But to be a sex worker and to be able to enjoy your job, but not, you can't be falling in love with clients all day. So when you go home, you can say, well, that was Riley's day, but here I am
Mhm.
now, and that's left there within those four walls. So you're able to use that dual identity to your advantage, and it's needed. It's healthy to have.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I can think back to my career. I had plenty of orgasms. Once I had a little experience and I was like getting really busy, my goal was $1,000 and at least one orgasm, or that was not a good day. If
Right.
that meant some of my most skilled clients all came in one day and it was like a 6 orgasm day, I was fucking tired. I was rich and I was like, I'm done. Like, this is fantastic. But like you said, I wasn't just like madly falling in love with people. That said, those experiences were very real.
Mhm.
Emily was a 8 hour real person, real situation. She's who knew at that time that she'd end up 20 some odd years later still in existence. Here I am. But like I had genuine love for some of my clients. You build relationships, you build friendships. The trust was like beyond most of what I had with men in my civilian life because you talk about such
Mhm.
intimate things that you don't speak about. And it's not just the clients that pour their heart out, right? Once you trust a client, we hear this from our staff all the time. It's like, oh, I told him about my dad's illness, or I told him
Mhm.
about, my struggles in school, or I told him about the custody battle with my kid. And like you confide things and you end up with soul ties in different kinds of ways. But I think much like an actor that could take on the weight of a heavy role, there are definitely certain actors that are notorious for that, certain movies that are. I remember the all the cast of Schindler's List really struggled afterwards because you
Mm.
take on a lot of the emotion, a lot of the energy of the subject matter, and you can't just go home at the end of the day and be like, "Hey, babe, how are you?"
Right.
Or when the whole movie wraps up and it's been 7 months of your life immersed in this, it takes a little bit of almost a grieving period, a recalibration. We talk to our staff all the time about self-care, about taking breaks, about not overworking yourself into the ground, not overscheduling yourself, because you do end up a little clouded on what's real, what's not. You have to remind yourself, Emily isn't really my name. It's not on my government ID. It's not what I'm called when I'm in trouble.
Right.
it's it's a character in essence, and yet you don't win an Oscar unless you give an authentic performance, not a fake authentic performance, an authentic performance. And so it becomes a skill, kind of like a survivor skill that I think sex workers take on with the dual identity. It must be very similar if you're like a secret CIA agent and you
Right.
have a literal double life. Like you have to disassociate because you can't be thinking about the fact that you're missing your daughter's dance recital when you're trying to catch a bad guy. Like for some reason, I have like movies just flashing through my mind, and I'm like, "What's the one where the girl gets stolen, taken?" Like you can't be like that, and
Right.
not be thinking with which identity at what given time. Like it's so confusing. Any kind of law enforcement or army situation where you have something covert. And you're like the FBI, the CIA, Secret Service, like you literally have a dual identity maybe not a dual name, but you have a dual identity. Witness protection program must fuck people up. But like, we as people in the sex industry, because even though we're not workers, we do have a sex work name to protect our privacy. We have times where you and I converse sometimes where, you know what, you're like, I'm done being Riley for today. And I'm like, if we don't take a break and go on vacation soon, I'm going to scream. Like, we need it, but it's almost like you overdevelop that skill. Like that's where the use it for evil comes in. Because I did some sneaky little dirty sexual things as Emily in my day. Which, again, we're talking about those episodes. That'll be on a premium plus one day, way in the future. But like, yeah, like shit does happen, and you really kind of can get a little clouded. And I didn't take enough self-care breaks during my career. I couldn't afford it at the time to take breaks. And we've seen some of our staff struggle sometimes when they don't take enough of a break. Because you shouldn't be talking about penis every single day. It's just not healthy.
But on the flip side of this, going to the clients, because they're coming in, excuse me, often with unmet needs. They want to receive, and they're open for that. And there's a fantasy element that if the sex worker is good at her job, there is a fantasy that's created that he's, I don't want to say buying into, because it sounds like he's being duped, but that he's living out. And I think there is often clients that get very attached. I don't know if we can always call it love or lust, but from the sex worker's end, that's scoring, right? She has a client, he's a regular, he's coming back to see her, he has built-in income, which, let's face it, is the name of the game. But on his end, he is releasing all sorts of neurochemicals and getting attached. And, you know, it can be hard to be a client in that situation and falling for a sex worker.
It's true. And I think it's got to be so difficult on the flip side, on the guy's side like that, because they're coming into it without the experience. This next hour and a half is fantasy time. And I mean, we have plenty of clients that use a fake first name for their own privacy. And so Bob is one guy and John is another. They're the same person. But if you don't know that you're supposed to do that kind of and separate, like, how do you separate if you haven't had a passionate experience like that ever in your life before, or it's been 6 years since someone touched me that way? Or I remember back in college when girls that looked this pretty used to look at me like you are right now, and like those kind of things. That's got to be hella confusing. He doesn't have any practice. He doesn't have a coach or someone to like guide him through and go, okay, well, this is what you do afterwards to kind of unwind, decompress, disassociate, unattach, cut the cord a little bit. I'm sure it can get very confusing and difficult to navigate. And yet I'm not surprised when I think at that point, clients kind of have a choice. They can learn the ropes and decide whether they use a fake name or not. Like they consciously remind themselves, this is what I'm paying for. This is what I'm buying. This is the service that I'm getting. I come back because it's fabulous service. And for the next 60 minutes, I'm going to be the guy that has this amazing girl and we just romp, you know, and it is what in the throes of passion, the clothes go flying and it's like up against the wall. It's like a movie. And then goes about his life. Or some of them can end up a little jaded. And I don't blame them for that. I wish they didn't go that way. I'd love to talk them kind of through it. But there is some that become a little bitter, feeling almost like they've been had, or almost being like cynical in the sense that like, I don't believe any compliment any worker ever gives me because I know the game. I know the routine. I'm sure you tell everyone he has a big dick or he's handsome or he's this or that, right? And they almost become cynical and jaded, which sex workers can become too. Yeah. We've met plenty of jaded stripper attitude in our day, right? Where it's just like, ugh, about everything. It's hard to think on both sides to navigate. I'm sure sex workers in relationships, it's different than sex workers that are single. And during the course of career, that can change. We see the changes in our staff when they roll between, you know, single and taken, or I shouldn't say taken, spoken for. On all of those things. It's so human. It's so human. It's the same way that regular civilian relationships work. You got to figure out the boundaries. It's bumpy to navigate at first. You can become bitter and have trauma from being, mistreated. And you can end up a little salty in the end.
Yeah.
I think that's as human as it comes, which is my favorite part of sex work because it's literally reflective of the human experience in so many ways. And this is just another one. But I don't think it's harmful to soak up all that good, energy, to let all those love hormones out. Let it flow in that room. Make your session for both client and worker as fabulous as possible. You're there anyway. You're paying for it anyway. You enjoy it anyway. So why not add a cherry on top? Like, why say no? I'm not having dessert. I've indulged too much. Like, that to me is crazy, right? Like, go balls to the wall, go all in, and just remember to do that. And not that I want to open us up to being counselors for all our clients, but if you're ever struggling on figuring out those boundaries, don't be shy to slide in our DMs and ask some questions. We are super experienced with this stuff, and we could talk you through it. Or find you a new muse to distract you for a little bit. Shake up the norm a little. Ruffle some feathers through your routine. But like, there's ways that we can help kind of guide people through that too, because we want our customers to feel fabulous. We don't want them to feel confused by the end, It's an interesting journey.
It is.
To be a guy. It's so different. I find it fascinating to think about. And I mean, I know of 2 or even 3 former staff workers of our staff members that married a client.
And what happens? It for sure happens. It's just not that common, I guess.
You know what? In my career, I knew 0 that it ever happened to. And then owning Muse has been super different. Obviously, we meet more people. We experience way more staff than the people that I met in my career. But like, it does happen. So something in that room was magical that night, right?
There is. And what is the other? It's like a scent that's released. Correct me here, because I know I'm going to struggle. But when 2 people meet, I mean, there could be there's attractive people everywhere, but all of a sudden you'll see 2 people, they lock eyes and they're like, there is an immediate attraction, and you just know. And I'm sure this is, the muses that end up getting married to a client. There is something there. It's pheromones. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That there is just this instant fire and attraction and desire for this person that, once there is that energy exchange, it is received on both ends. And people fall in love. I mean, that's the beauty of love and life. But in the four walls of a massage parlor, it can be tricky, but it's very interesting.
That never happened to me. Like I said, I fancied a few clients. I definitely had like loving feelings for many of my regulars. I mean, we had such intimate friendships. Many of my regulars were years long. So it was long-term connections. And listen, juggling and battling that many relationships at once was not easy either, but there was still boundaries on it because of work. I never experienced having that magic moment in a parlor. I can't imagine for the worker how confusing that must be. And no offense to the client, but immediately my brain goes to the worker, because if you're so hyper trained on disassociating, if you're so hyper trained about separating like your double life, your identities and what have you, to have that kind of like instantaneous jolt where it's like smushed together must be boggling. I'm literally, when we're done this, gonna like call up one of our girls we still speak to and be like, I have some questions, because I've never actually asked flat out, like, in the moment that happened, were you like a million question marks bouncing around your head, or did you forget you were at work altogether? Like, and then when you went home, were you like, oh fuck, like how did this thought go? Like, I don't care about how the relationship like progressed. I don't need to know the dirty details, but like, how did you digest that mentally? Because most of them, from if I remember, they didn't end up staying at work for very long after the love came about, right? That's got to be weird. And then you got to think about your finances. Like, most people don't think about that with sex work in that regard too, is you can't just stop. You still got to pay the bill.
Find a new career,
right. And it's not even something like, oh, well, I'll change to stripping, or
Right.
I'll work at a different parlor, or maybe I'll move to his country. Like you still need an income.
Mhm.
The rent bill still comes on the 1st. Like it's the 27th, girl. What are we doing? Like
Yeah.
we need to figure some shit out. I never thought about that, but it makes sense. The timelines now of how quickly they were like, just a few more weeks, guys, and I'm out of here.
Gonna get
Retirement is
married.
coming. Right. Damn, that must have been a weird juggle. That really must have been a weird juggle for them.
Well, I know it's always fun to add in some like personal stories or things about ourselves to these episodes. So when it comes to the science of sex, I'll give you a little tidbit about Riley.
Yay.
I've had very few casual sexual relationships in my life because I'm aware of who I am. I fall head over heels with people that I have sex with. Like it's instantaneous. He's the one. I'm marrying him. I generally get their name tattooed on me. Like I have a pattern. It's pretty distinct. It's really bad. Like I've promised everyone in my life to not do all of those same things again, but it's very real. And it's for me, and I imagine a lot of people, very uncontrollable. Like the hormones take over and the way my brain changes or the way it's wired to this person, the connection that's built is powerful.
Well, I'm not going to say my opinions on this because I know that you're working on it. I am one of the people that's like, stop doing that. But many relationship experts will say that feeling of I'm on a fast moving train I can't get off of is actually a giant red flag. And you should leap off that train as quickly and safely as possible. Because if it's going to be a stable, healthy situation, it shouldn't feel out of control. It shouldn't feel like this amazingly spinning, dizzying kind of spiral into something. And it doesn't mean you end up in a bad situation every time, but that uncontrolled feeling means that you're not reacting rationally. You're strictly reacting through emotion. And that never leads anywhere to good places. It often ends up with either a longer path, a harder path. Even if you end up at the same result, you might have been able to save yourself some struggles, some panic, some heartache, some tears, some sleepless nights, and so on. If you had just kind of been like, I'm going to wait for the next train, or why don't we take the scenic route, or how about the long road? Like just, it doesn't mean everything has to go to snail's pace either, but you shouldn't have that out of control feeling, because that is the red flag, right? If you suddenly met a friend, a new girlfriend, and she's like, we're going to go the world, everything's just crazy with her. It's fun for a while, and then you got broke, exhausted, a broke down van at the side of the road somewhere on a shitty road trip where y'all just stopped being friends because you fought over a guy. Like it shouldn't feel so crazy. That's often like how teenagers feel. I remember like a teenager just being, you cannot think of anything else. That boy consumes your brain. You're staring at your math homework. You have no idea what anyone's talking about. I hear for guys it's even worse because this head and this head can't work at the same time. He's trying not to look at the girl beside his desk that he has a crush on and masturbates to all the time. He's got a penis that's hard under the desk. He's trying to hide it. Like, he's not taking in the history lesson. So like, as we mature and as we get practice, we're supposed to date with more logic and more reason. Right. Not always easy to accomplish. I'm equally guilty of falling down a few spirally, rabbit holes in my day too, and end up like Alice in Wonderland. It's fun because the adrenaline. It's new. It's exciting. That part I get for men and sex workers, right? Because that rush must happen. But again, you can digest it if you realize that you're going into it in a controlled situation. It's an hour every Thursday that I see so-and-so for a 60-minute duo, you can wrap your head around that and know that it's within that context and that time frame. And when it's done, it's over and we go about our regular life, and I'll see you next Thursday, and then whoosh all over again. But if it's taking your mind so far off that you're not present at work anymore because all you're thinking about is the massage girl's titties,
right?
And what you're going to do next time and how far it's going to go and all the stuff, that's hella distracting. It's like a teenager whose grades just drop. His performance review at work is going to suck because he's just consumed with the stripper. You have to keep logic and balance because as adults, we have too many fucking responsibilities. If we didn't, spiral away. Who cares? Right? You don't have to be home when the street lights come on. Like, do whatever the hell you want. Eat all the calories. Do all the things. Be frivolous. Gamble away. Right? But like when we have responsibilities, it makes us have to jump into that logic brain. And I mean, once you're at a point as a single parent with kids of a certain age, you consider partners differently than you did when they were little or than you did when you didn't have them, or the way you will when they're 26 and have their own partners. Like, there's so many factors that come into how we digest that rush feeling of new love. And new love can be so awesome, but it can be so lethal. Because before you know it, you're dizzy, you're living with someone, you have tattoos.
Look, life is a journey. Just enjoy the ride.
It really is. But these are how we learn our lessons and we get smarter. It's the only way to learn to navigate the things, or we'd all be like 13-year-old boys.
Right.
Every cheerleader would be like, oh, just mesmerized and captivated and clueless to anything else. I mean, we'd bump into walls if we behaved that way all the time, right? So
True.
I just hope that in general, people can learn those things with the least amount of heartache. We all have to go through some. But if we could be not stubborn and learn those lessons a little quicker, it would be great. I've never been one to believe in regrets. I don't regret any of the shitty relationships I've had in my life. But I do look back and think, why did it have to take 8 years though?
I fully agree.
And 6 or 4, or the fact that that little voice 3 months in really fucking knew. It was like, I don't know what Oprah's talking about when she talks about the little voice. The little voice is loud.
Right.
And we just do through it and ride his penis into the sunset. It's crazy. It's crazy. But we're all guilty of it, men and women alike. Let's hope we're smarter, stronger, and have enough wine to get through it the next time. That's all I'm going to say.
And don't forget to have hugs for 20 seconds and kiss for 6. You will live longer.
Absolutely. I've told Riley that's the new instructions for every time we see each other. I want both. I'm going to put a timer. Like anything less, it's officially unacceptable. I love it. I love that she's so hot and agreeable too. You hear that, guys? She said okay. Yay. Well, I think this wraps this one up. That was just a beautiful exchange we just had. Thank you for all the pleasure. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, share the video, comment down below. Always make an effort to hit that thumbs up. It helps our algorithm a whole bunch. Follow us on social media, and we'll see you next time on MUSE on the Mic.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.